Hi everyone, it's Emily, and I hope you're all having a wonderful holiday season and looking forward to the upcoming new year. So I made this Q&A for my 5,000 subscriber milestone, and it's a bit crazy that we're nearing at 7,000 now. And honestly, since starting this channel last April, I never would have expected to be where I am today, and I just wanted to thank all of you for everyone who watches my videos and interacts and who has subscribed to help me reach this point. And I also wanted to thank everyone who submitted questions for this Q&A video. So I received quite a few questions both on my YouTube community tab as well as on Twitter. So let's get into them. The first question is from Mandy, and she asks, what do you think the strangest game is in your collection in terms of concept, gameplay, or even acquisition? So I don't necessarily have an interesting story when it comes to game acquisitions. Most of the games in my current library are ones that I picked up since 2019, and most of them have been purchased online. But I guess when it comes to the strangest games in my collection, as a JRPG collector, there are a lot of weird Japanese titles, so I wanted to highlight a couple. The first is this 3DS copy of Conception 2, and while I haven't played this yet, the concept I think is kind of strange, wherein that the combat relies on you making children to help you in battle. And along the same lines, Stellar Glow is also another odd one in my JRPG collection. And this one, you have a lot of singing witches used in tactical gameplay battle. Now when it comes to the Switch, another kind of odd JRPG I have in my collection is Dragon Star Vernier. And this one's strange in that you feed these witches dragon's blood, and if you feed them too much dragon's blood, they go a bit crazy. And so this whole game is sort of kind of balancing these powers. These next couple questions have to do with JRPGs and time. And so this first question asks, how do I manage my time with games? Do I try to complete them and see them all the way through, or do I also drop games if I'm not totally feeling it? And I would say there are games that I've definitely dropped because they weren't necessarily clicking with me. There are a couple this year that this happened that I'll go a little bit more into detail during my year-end wrap-up review, where I talk about all the games that I played this year. But I think when it comes to choosing games, I really try to select games that I feel like I would see through to the end. So I would say there are not too many games that I've dropped because I dislike them. And the next question specifically has to do with the length of JRPGs, which could go on for hundreds of hours, and sort of what my thoughts are generally when it comes to approaching these type of titles. So I feel like this is a very subjective question when it comes to individual games. There are some games that I think do a good job at being very long but very engaging the entire time. Usually ones without so much filler or a lot of unnecessary grinding and has pretty good pacing overall. But there are some games that you kind of feel like they're trying to extend the gameplay time with a lot of filler just to kind of fluff it up a bit. Generally, I don't mind spending hundreds of hours on a game that I really enjoy, such as what I did with the Xenoblade games these past couple of years. Each of those I put in easily 100 hours, and it was time, I think, well spent because I enjoyed it the entire time. But there are other games I feel like that are not necessarily worth it for me to spend so much time in because of that sort of trade-off of enjoyment and also just the backlog of all the other games I want to get to. But when it comes to what aspects of games I like to prioritize when it comes to spending my time in a game, I would say probably story trumps combat, but I think good games do have a balance of both. But overall, I would take a really good story in a game that has mediocre combat because I feel like sometimes a game only needs to be very simple when it comes to combat, where the story is really highlighted. But on the flip side, if there's a game that has really strong combat systems and kind of interesting gameplay aspects, I'm not usually as invested in them because I prefer spending my time in very enriching story and characters I connect to. And then this next question is asking for some JRPG recommendations that involve some action, romance, and relationship building. So I feel like you could find these aspects in a lot of specifically Switch JRPGs on the market now. A lot of strategy RPGs involves a lot of the romance and relationship building when it comes to stat builds. For example, Fire Emblem Three Houses does that, as well as the upcoming Fire Emblem Engage, I'm sure will also have those aspects as well. There's also a new port that's releasing next year that I'm looking forward to. That's called Record of Arborist Or. And that one you follow different generations of different romantic pairings and see what their children kind of do in this big saga. So I haven't played those games yet, but they sound really interesting. But if you're looking for more action type games that involves romance or relationship building, I would say the Rune Factory games are great for this. If you don't mind crafting or farming mechanics when it comes to gameplay, they're very strong kind of hack and slash RPGs mixed with an emphasis of romance and sort of marriage-based gameplay. And I'll also throw in this game that I actually own on the PS4, but it's also available on the Nintendo Switch, and that's Shining Resonance Refrain. And so that is a pure action JRPG with dragons, but it also has quite a bit of a dating sim mixed in there as well. So I had a few questions that I asked about any hidden gems that are in my game library. I feel like the term hidden gem is a little difficult to define. So I'm going to try to approach it as games that I don't generally hear people talk about that often, even though they might have some popularity or are well rated. And I feel like there's a lot of games that fall under this category that I may not have necessarily played yet, but are on my radar that I'll hope to play sometime. One of these is Tokyo Xanadu, which is a Nihon Falcom game, and the playstyle is very close to Ys, mixed with some Persona 5, even though this predates Persona 5. So I would consider that a hidden gem because usually when people talk about Falcom games, they either talk about Ys or the Trail series. And then when thinking about some other systems like the 3DS, I feel like people who collect for or play games on the 3DS system usually have a pretty good idea of what games are available. So I feel like specific consoles like the 3DS, it's hard to pinpoint games that are considered hidden gems. But if I were to pinpoint one hidden gem on there that I feel like not enough people talk about, that would be either The Alliance Alive or 7th Dragon 3 Code VFD, that game. But when it comes to systems with huge libraries like the Nintendo Switch, it's easy, I think, to talk about games that might not be on everyone's radar because of how vast the Switch catalog is. So I think there's some obvious choices that people have probably heard of, or at least there's some outlets that definitely talk about these games, like Astral Chain is one. I also feel like NIS has a ton of games that a lot of people don't necessarily talk about. For example, there's Labyrinth of Refrain, Covenant of Dusk, which is a first-person dungeon crawler, though that one might be more on people's radar because of the new game coming out next year. And there's of course all these indie games that the limited print companies are coming out with. I feel like you only hear people talk about certain titles all the time. So I guess one that I recently picked up that I don't hear a ton of people talk about is Heaven's Vault, which I'll go into more detail during my December pickup video. I guess along the lines of hidden gem, I was asked what is my favorite worst game. So a game that I really enjoyed that a lot of people probably don't. I feel like this was a little bit difficult to answer, so I'm going to go with a game that I really enjoyed in my childhood. That is a little bit random, but I guess hear me out here. That would be Fur Fighters on the PS2. And I know it's not a good game, but I really enjoyed the multiplayer. My brother and I used to play that game all the time together. And it's very clunky, but somehow we both found it really fun, especially the multiplayer aspect. I would say the storyline was not good. I don't even know if we finished it, to be honest, because of just how weird some of those puzzles were and just how restrictive it was to go and find these babies and all the different things you have to do to finish a level. But yeah, I guess that's the best worst game that I've enjoyed. And I was also asked a lot of deserted island sort of questions, where if I were to just pick one game to bring with me, which one would it be? And I feel like if I were to choose a game to bring with me on a deserted island, it would have to be probably single player, because I'm guessing there won't be Wi-Fi available on stranded on an island. And then one that's also just long with a lot of content. So something that comes to mind is probably Xenoblade 2, since there's so much content in that game, and especially if you want to level up all the different characters through the gacha system and things like that. Or I could also bring something like Skyrim or The Witcher 3, which again has a ton of content and something that would keep me entertained for, I think, a long period of time. But I guess out of all those, Skyrim probably has the most flexibility when it comes to different things that you can explore in each playthrough. So I might have to go with that one. And here I was asked if I were to erase any game from my memory, which one would I want to play over again? There's so many great games that I really enjoyed that this would be, I think, a really cool kind of power to have. but if I were to just choose one, it would probably be The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. That was very much my childhood favorite game and still is one of my favorite games today. And I would love to just play through it again and kind of stumble around trying to figure out where to go in all the dungeons and things like that. And here I'm just going to answer the first question and maybe go to the other questions in the other sections. But what is the game that I was most excited for to release? And most recently, that was probably Xenoblade 3. I was very much hyped for that release, given that I finished Xenoblade 2 and Torna just before Xenoblade 3 came out. But I guess further back, the next game would be Fire Emblem Three Houses. I was very much excited for that after just loving all of the 3DS Fire Emblem games and seeing what it would be like on the Switch. I actually bought the game before I got a Switch. I initially played it on my brother's system. That was how much I was looking forward to that game. And then if I were to go way back, like nearly 10 years ago, the next game that I was most excited for would have been The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. And that was, I've mentioned on this channel before, the game that got me back into gaming when I was in grad school. And having loved A Link to the Past, I was very much excited to experience the new game on the 3DS. Then next I was asked what's my favorite visual novel, and at the moment it is probably AI: The Asami Files. I just really fell in love with that game when I played it earlier this summer. A lot of those characters and the plot lines have just really stuck with me. And it's making me look forward to playing the Zero Escape games, which I finally own and I'm hoping to play sometime next year. And then Fem Trooper asked me what was my first JRPG that I played. And the first traditional JRPG that I played was Pokemon Silver back on the Game Boy Color. And that was my first console, and I believe that was probably one of the first games that we got for Christmas that year too. Agent Cooper asked, now that I've played Xenoblade 3, how would I rank all the Xenoblade games? I unfortunately never played X because I never owned or had access to a Wii U, but it's really hard, I think, to rank them. I think Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is still my favorite because that was my first experience with Xenoblade, and I was just blown away by the environments and the story, and it's a very special game to me still. So I think that one would be still one, but a close second. It's really difficult to choose between Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and 3 for different reasons. While I'll say that 3 definitely refined all the combat systems and different things in the game, I think I still enjoyed 2 slightly more. And I don't know if that's because I just enjoyed the different worlds in that game, as well as the story a little bit more and characters. I think I would give 2 just a slight edge over 3. But that might change once the last bit of the DLC for 3 comes out with the new DLC story. So we'll see if that shifts my opinion or not. All right, so here's some random questions that may or may not have to do with gaming. The first one is, do I enjoy listening to game soundtracks? And if so, do I have any favorites? So I'm very basic, and most of the gaming soundtracks I listen to are from my favorite games. So I probably listen to the Nihon Falcom OSTs the most, mostly Trails with some E's in there as well. And I also really enjoy the Hades soundtrack. And then lastly, I really enjoy the Xenoblade OST as well. I've been meaning to get into more OST soundtracks, trying to expand my horizons a bit. There's just so many great video game soundtracks that I haven't listened to all the way through. Even though I've enjoyed the music from certain games, I just need to put some time in and listen to the actual soundtracks at some point. These next few questions have to do with music as well. Olivia asks, do I import any music from Korea and Japan? If so, which albums and artists are my favorite? So the short answer is yes. The long answer is that I think, discovered an appreciation for music during grad school. During that time, I found myself gravitating towards a lot of different hobbies. That's why I mentioned that I picked up gaming again when I was in grad school. Another big thing that I picked up was getting into K-pop and K-dramas and that sort of outlet for my hobbies. So in addition to collecting games and figures, I'm also really big into collecting K-pop albums and merchandise, though not as much as I was, I would say, in grad school. I've definitely been scaling down a bit and just focusing on my favorite artists, who happen to be 2PM, Dreamcatcher, TVXQ, the Wonder Girls, and Girls' Generation. So those are the main groups that I follow nowadays. Mostly second gen older artists. If you are not into K-pop, this probably sounds like gibberish to you, but if you're in the know, you're in the know. So yeah, I like to import a lot of music CDs from Korea and Japan because those groups are very active in both countries. And then when it comes to Japanese groups, I mostly listen to Japanese rock groups. My favorite is Bandmade. I would recommend any of their albums. I think they're amazing. And then there are a few others that I've listened to over the years casually. I would say One OK Rock is one that I would recommend. I've seen them twice in concerts and they're great live, and I gravitate more towards their older albums, but their most recent one is good as well. This next question is, who is my favorite video game character? I would say usually my default answer for this is Estelle Bright from the Trails series. I really love her character growth, and like her last name, she has a very bright personality and a ray of sunshine, and one that's hard not to love. And this leads me to which character would I invite to a birthday party. So I think Estelle would make a great addition to a birthday party with her very fun and sunny personality. And then someone asked me about my research and work. So as I mentioned in my previous Q&A, I am a postdoctoral research fellow, and my field is in statistics and epidemiology. So I work with a lot of health-related data analysis. When it comes to what projects I'm working on now, I'm mostly looking at different disease like incidence and mortality things, which is a little bit morbid, and looking at disparity trends and things like that when it comes to approaching these topics. Apologies, I'm being a bit vague, but that's what I've been mostly working on recently. When it comes to career goals, I still really enjoy research, and I think that's something that I'll be sticking to. So I was asked questions about dogs versus cats. I would say I am a cat person, though I don't know if that's so much my personality or it's also the fact that I'm severely allergic to dogs, but not cats for some reason. So a little weird fact about me. When it comes to 50 dogs versus 100 cats, I would say neither, because that's way too many animals to look after. I think it's hard enough just to look after one pet. I'll just bring up my allergy card and say I can't take care of 50 dogs. Even if they are hypoallergenic, I can't see myself taking care of 50 dogs. All right, so we're gonna get into some of the collecting questions now, and there are quite a number of these. So this first question is, what is my holy grail item? And so is it a game that I already own or one that I would like to purchase in the future? So holy grails are interesting. I think a lot of people like to equate these as just really expensive games that are out of their price range. So if I were to cite one of those, it'd probably be some in-box Game Boy Advance games from my childhood, like the Link to the Past and Four Swords little combo pack. If I wanted a nice in-mint box edition of that. And there's some other great JRPGs that I never got to play on those systems that are probably a little bit unattainable for me if I wanted nice in-box editions of those, like the two Fire Emblem games on the Game Boy Advance, as well as some things like Golden Sun and other very popular JRPG titles. I guess on modern systems, the game that I'm really kind of kicking myself for not getting as limited edition is Xenoblade Chronicles 2. There was a point where I could have ordered it and I was thinking about it, but I decided to put it off because of moving, which I'm still kind of kicking myself today for doing. I've been considering kind of doing a sinking fund approach and just saving a little bit every month to buy one of these expensive Holy Grail items, but there's just so many games out there to appreciate and ones that are coming out in the future. It's a little hard for me to decide if I want to go back and collect some of those semi-unattainable ones or just to save money for things that are coming out in the future. And when it comes to my favorite console to collect for, when it comes to the number of games I own, it would look like the Switch is probably my favorite console, which I definitely really enjoy collecting for the Switch. But I think I'd have to give it to the 3DS system as my favorite console to collect for, mostly because of nostalgic reasons, and that was the system that got me back into gaming. And I just really appreciate the box art and spines for the 3DS system. They're much more interesting to look at than the sea of red you have with the Nintendo Switch games. I was asked if I collect any GameCube games, and the answer is no, mostly because I've never actually played a GameCube before. I never owned one or had access to one, so that's why it hasn't really been on my radar, and given the prices these days, it's not something I really see myself pursuing anytime soon. This next question is asking, how do I determine when to take risks on games for my collection? When it comes to games that are not necessarily in genres that I typically collect for. Example being Hades, and that was my first roguelike game. I guess when it comes to finding a balance, there has to be some element in a game that I have to gravitate towards. So I think there are a lot of good hybrid games out there that have elements of certain genres, and so if there's some aspect that I might really enjoy, it'll kind of lead me to try it out rather than something completely foreign. With Hades, I really like action games, so I knew from that standpoint I would probably enjoy the gameplay. And Hades is also known for not being too brutal when it comes to a roguelike, in that every time you die, you do gain some experience and abilities to help your next run through. So having that familiarity with the action genre, as well as the story being rooted in Greek mythology, which is something that I really enjoyed growing up. Also, I thought the art style looked amazing, so that also kind of pushed me over the edge to give that game a try. So the next collecting question is, what is the most hard to find or expensive game in my collection? I didn't think too long and hard about this one, but it's probably the Fire Emblem Fates special edition I own. As many of you know, this game shot up way in price, and it's hard even just to find a loose copy for under a few $100s. I bought this actually on the used market after release because it was so hard to pre-order this back in the day. And I'm forgetting exactly how much I paid for it, but definitely not what it goes for these days. So this next question asks, which games ended up surprising me the most? And this was really hard to answer, mostly because I usually only buy games if I think I'm going to enjoy them. Early in life, I found a lot of enjoyment in JRPGs and action games, so it's not really surprising for me to pick up those games nowadays. And visual novels are not too surprising either, because I've really enjoyed reading. It's something that used to be my main hobby back, like, I would say junior and senior year of high school, as well as in college. So I'm not going to say Hades, because I had a feeling I would enjoy that game given its reception and all the different elements that looked like something I would enjoy. But I guess if I were to choose a genre or a game that I didn't think I would enjoy until I actually started playing it, it'd probably be the Ultimate titles. So even though I do read a lot, and I've certainly read romance novels and things like that, I had some reservations that otome novels might be a little bit too cheesy or cringe to go through, but the first game that I played on the recommendation of a friend was Collar X Malice, and that game was more of a kind of mystery thriller sort of game, rather than just something that's strictly romance. So that surprised me how much I really enjoyed the story and getting to know all the characters and things like that. And since then, I've been buying a bunch of otome novels that I haven't necessarily gotten to yet, but slowly been trying to get through them and enjoying them. All right, so next is, which console, handheld, or franchises do I regret not getting or buying sooner? So I think a lot of collectors, especially retro game collectors, have many regrets when it comes to not collecting something sooner. For me, it's probably the original Nintendo DS. I'm really kicking myself for skipping that entire era of gaming. There's just so many great titles and games that are too expensive for me to probably consider getting, though I have been thinking about getting Pokemon Soul Silver and revisiting my favorite generation of Pokemon. It's just difficult, I feel like, with DS games when it comes to fakes that are in circulation, and just some of the pricing is outrageous. It's really hard to justify buying those when you can emulate them pretty easily. And I could also say Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance. I have regrets of having those games traded in back in the day, and not looking into some of the other things available on those catalogs at the time, due to, of course, you know, income restrictions as a little kid, and I guess really just knowledge of what's available out there, since I definitely didn't know all the games that were available in those years. So the next question is, which handheld is my favorite in terms of form and function? And I think when it comes down to comfort without like a grip or anything, I think the PS Vita has a slight edge over my other handheld consoles. While my Switch Lite does look nice, I definitely need a grip with that, or else my hand starts to cramp up during semi-long play sessions. And the PS Vita, I think, just really sits nicely in the hands, and I love the touchscreen components. It's much easier than on the Switch. That I don't have a grip for yet. I'm sure it would be nice to have a grip, but I haven't really felt the need to get a grip for my Vita yet. Then I was asked what got me into collecting and why do I like collecting in general. So I guess I've always been a bit of a collector. I definitely had a rock collection when I was a little kid, and I collected Beanie Babies as well. But I feel like I didn't really get into collecting until grad school. So I guess having a bit more disposable income definitely made it more possible for me to start collecting more. But I've always just found collecting fun, both for display purposes and also just knowing that I put the time in to curate something that's my own, that are things that I really enjoy. This next question asks some financial things about collecting, and specifically investments. I haven't really talked too much about this topic on this channel, even though I think it is really important for collecting channels to talk about financials and things like that, mostly because I don't know how to approach this topic yet, because everyone is at different stages of life and different financial situations. So it's really hard to, I think, make a relatable video on this topic. As I mentioned in, I think, one of my videos, I do not consider my physical game collection an investment at all. It's not part of my investment portfolio. I'm actually very into personal finance, so I keep records of my different investments and track things monthly and keep lists of all the things that I buy throughout the month and do like updated net worth statements monthly. I know I'm a total nerd when it comes to this stuff. So I'm in a very fortunate position where I have very low living expenses. This will definitely change next year after my move, but right now my living expenses are very low. And because of that, I'm actually able to save and invest most of my work paychecks that I get through my postdoctoral fellowship. When it comes to investing, I choose the tax advantage retirement funds for investing purposes, and I don't really invest in collectibles. Mostly because I don't really like having a high percentage of speculative assets in my investment portfolio to carry on with me towards retirement, which will likely be a very long time from now. But in addition to being a collector, I'm also a hobby seller. So a lot of my hobbies get kind of cycled through resale. So that's generally where I get most of my funds to fund new hobby items. So that's definitely not something that everyone can do. That's why I haven't really talked about it so much. And I don't really resell games at this point. I might in the future if there are games that I picked up that I no longer enjoy. I might try to resell them to fund for new games in my collection or other hobby items. But yeah, to summarize, I keep my hobby collections and my savings and investment portfolio separate. All right, so moving on, this next question is asking which console I would consider collecting for next. And I kind of already spoiled this in my Instagram account, but I do plan on collecting more for the PlayStation Portable system soon. So I'm planning to have a video talking about PSP collecting in 2023 out within the next month or so. And in that video, I'll likely go over games that I want to prioritize and things like that for that system. So when it comes to my favorite games, my collection, not necessarily from a financial standpoint, I would probably say one of my collector's editions from my favorite franchises are probably my prized possessions in my collection. So something from Fire Emblem, Xenoblade, or Trails are definitely high favorites of mine that I'm really happy to have picked up. And then Allie asked me how many games I have total across all my collections. And so I do keep spreadsheets of all of my collections to kind of keep track of what I purchased and things that I want to maybe acquire in the future. So I think these spreadsheets are fairly up to date. I do include some pre-orders in here, so the numbers might be slightly inflated from what I have in my collection right now. But it looks like for the Nintendo Switch, I have 154 games at the moment. For the 3DS, I have 65. The DS, I have 10 games. PSP, I have 2 at the moment. PS Vita, I have 15. PS4, I own 21. And then lastly for PS5, I own 7 titles. All right, so this last section of questions are all channel related. So I get this question a lot in my videos. People expect if you talk about game collecting on YouTube, you have to show off your big collection in the background of your videos. Which, don't get me wrong, I think that's fun and I really enjoy seeing other people's collections, but I don't think it's necessarily something you have to do if you don't want to. The main reason why I haven't shown any of my collections in my background is because, again, I'm moving soon. I'm staying with family right now, so I can't really display my stuff in their space. So it's mostly in storage right now. I do have this little shelf that I'll take a picture of that houses some of my Nintendo stuff. But again, most of my game collection is either kind of crammed into that shelf or tucked away in bins right now. So after I move in a few months, I will probably slowly have a little setup to display all of my collections, because as I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons why I like collecting is to kind of display some of my favorite things. So I had a few questions regarding my first Q&A where I talked about how I started my channel as a way to improve my verbal communication skills and asking how that's been going for me. I've definitely noticed, and I think a few of you have also commented, that there's definitely a noticeable difference when it comes to my more recent videos compared to some of my older ones. So I definitely think YouTube has helped me in this regard. And I've also mentioned how I've been going to some conferences when it comes to my day job. And I've had to present some of my research work in front of an audience panel. And I definitely don't consider myself a very good public speaker, which is again why I wanted to start practicing using this channel and talking about hobbies as a way to practice. But last month I had a really big oral presentation that I gave at a big conference, and I definitely noticed a huge improvement when I was giving that presentation. And I think definitely this YouTube channel kind of helped me gain that confidence, and also just helped me practice to improve that skill. But yeah, I think in summary, practice is definitely key, and also sort of having a loose plan of what you want to talk about and convey before you start. I've found to be very helpful. I don't script my videos, as I'm sure many of you maybe noticed, but I do like to kind of put bullet points of how I want to structure what I'm talking about, at least in my head or sometimes down on paper, to really kind of help focus what I want to communicate and do it in an efficient way, right? So next, Chinchilla asked me, what do your in real life friends and family think of your going following? But yeah, I haven't really revealed to many people that I do YouTube and on social media and places like that, talking about games. My family knows, and I've talked to a few friends about it, but none of them are really into the YouTube gaming community or anything like that. So they've actually, I don't think they've ever watched my videos or know what my social media handles are. So I think it's still a little bit in the dark for them. And then Mito asked me, would you be able to make a top 10 of your favorite video game series? So I can definitely do this, though I'm afraid it's gonna be very similar to my top 10 favorite video games list, since many of those are series. And I would say a lot of the games and franchises that appeared in that video would be very similar into this sort of top 10 video. So I think it might be best to hold off on a top 10 list like this, and maybe work in a few other series under my belt to see kind of how some of my favorite games shape over time, and present a new list that would probably be a little bit more fresh. Then I was asked if I have any plans for streaming, either on Twitch or on YouTube, and the short answer is yes, I would like to. I don't know when that's going to be feasible. Definitely, I think after my move, I will look more into it, but really I don't have the equipment or the setup for streaming at this time. Since being qualified for AdSense last July, I haven't used any of my YouTube paychecks for anything. I just have been having it sit there, waiting to see how much tax will be taken out of it, and then using hopefully those funds to reinvest into the channel, either with equipment to do streaming or better audio video sort of equipment. But yeah, I would like to do streaming or Let's Plays or something at some point. Even though this is primarily a collecting channel, I think it would be fun to work in some streams every now and then. And I was asked what do I think I could do to improve my videos. I think in anything you do, there's room for improvement. I think definitely a setup and equipment would make a difference for this channel. And because I edit my own videos, I think the more practice I have for editing, the better the videos would hopefully get over time. And I think also recording my own footage instead of relying on video game trailers when talking about games would also improve the channel a lot. So it's something I want to work towards as well. And then Brian asked what I use to record and edit my videos. So my earlier videos I filmed on a DSLR camera. It was a old, what was it? Canon Rebel i5 camera that had not so great audio quality. that everyone complained about. So I recently switched to my new phone, which is a Pixel 7, and it's not the most ideal setup right now. When filming, I have to use the back-facing camera because it's a little bit better, and I find it a lot more difficult to know where to look when it comes to the camera lens and knowing kind of what the picture frame looks like mid-recording. So eventually I'd like to probably upgrade maybe to a vlogging camera or something to make the process a little bit easier. But when it comes to editing, I've been using Wondershare Filmora 11. It's not necessarily the best editing software you could use on the market, but for the most part I found it pretty user-friendly and easy to use, though you do have to pay for it. And the last couple questions are asking about my YouTube channel name. So Orbology was something that I made up kind of randomly that was inspired by the Trails series, which is one of my favorite series of all time. In these games, they have this what's called orbital technology, which is used as their main energy source when it comes to like electricity and things like that, as well as very much integrated into the combat magic system. So I always just found those mechanics really interesting and decided to name my channel after it. All right, so I believe those are all the questions that you guys submitted. So again, I wanted to thank everyone who participated, and I hope you found the answers to these questions at least somewhat interesting. And again, I just wanted to thank everyone for helping me reach this point, and it's definitely something that I never could have imagined would have happened since starting this channel last April. And I'm very much excited to see where this channel will be moving forward in the future and have you guys along for the ride. So I have a lot of videos I plan to upload very soon. I'm going over some pickups that I've received this past month, as well as a lot of games that I've been playing lately, because I've had a lot more free time when it comes to actually playing some of my games that I'm very excited to talk about with you all. And next month is going to be a little bit crazy, I think, when it comes to some new releases that are coming out that I've been highly anticipating, as well as some kind of collection goals that I want to talk about with you all. So I hope you guys look forward to all these videos, and until my next one, bye guys.